Hi, welcome to Starz Recap. Today I'm going to explain an American thriller horror movie called Longlegs, which was released in the year 2024, directed by Osgood Perkins. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. At the beginning of the movie, a car pulls up outside a house. A girl notices it from her bedroom window and steps outside to investigate. She approaches the car to examine it but finds no one inside. Before she can make sense of the situation, someone calls her name from behind. She walks around to the back of the house to see who it is but finds no one there. Suddenly, a man appears and says, "There she is, the almost birthday girl. Looks like I've got my long legs on today, but what happens if I..." The scene abruptly cuts off. The next scene shifts to an FBI department meeting, where the boss briefs the team on a case involving the pursuit of a serial killer. Here, we are introduced to a young, new FBI agent named Lee Harker. Lee and her assigned partner, Agent Fisk, head to a neighborhood to investigate. Upon arrival, Fisk instructs Lee to stay back while he goes door-to-door questioning residents about the suspect. After he leaves, Lee steps out, sensing something unusual. Her attention is drawn to a particular house. When Fisk returns, she tells him that the suspect is in house number 3525. She suggests calling it in, but he dismisses the idea, insisting they can't rely on a hunch on their first day in the field. He advises her to relax and says he will check it out himself. Fisk approaches the house and knocks on the door. The moment it opens, he is shot in the head, killed instantly. Terrified, Lee rushes into the house to investigate and finds a man in one of the rooms. The suspect quietly surrenders without resistance. The scene then shifts to an interrogation room, where Lee is asked to say the first word that comes to mind for each image shown to her. Afterward, a number between 0 and 100 is generated, and she is instructed to state the first number that comes to her mind. Later, we see Lee with agents Carter and Browning. Carter remarks that she beat the number generator 8 times and asks how she did it. Lee responds that she also missed it 8 times, to which Carter says, "Half psychic is better than not psychic at all." Carter then tells her about the Horn family, who lived in that house for 12 years before being murdered 2 months ago. Browning adds, 4 victims, but technically 3 murders and a suicide. The father stabbed his wife 61 times before the blade snapped off the handle. Carter explains that a letter was found with the bodies, written in a coded alphabet that did not match the handwriting of anyone connected to the family. He reveals they have 10 such letters, all written by the same hand. Over the past 30 years, 10 houses, 10 families. Each crime scene was signed with a single word, Longlegs. "Someone or something is making the fathers do it," Carter says. "And so far, we've been damned trying to figure out what, or who." Browning turns to Carter and says that Lee isn't ready for this case. Carter replies, if she has a better idea, she's welcome to run with it. Later, Carter brings Lee into his office and asks for her version of what happened in Colfax with Agent Fisk's shooting. She explains that it felt like something tapping her on the shoulder, guiding her where to look. Carter asks if she's ever experienced anything like that before. She admits that she has, from time to time. He then asks her what she sees. In response, she asks what all the victim families have in common. Carter explains that each family had a daughter with a birthday on the 14th of a given month, but only the Horn family was murdered on that exact date. Lee becomes deeply engrossed in the investigation, spending hours at the crime scenes. Eventually, she falls asleep at one of them. Later that night, Carter takes her out for a drink and asks about her progress. She explains that there were no signs of forced entry, and forensics found no evidence that the suspect had ever been inside the house. The only things left behind were the bodies of the victims, all killed with objects found inside their own homes. Twice, the murder weapon was a shotgun, both times legally registered to the father. 8 times, the weapon was a knife from the family's kitchen, and once, it was a hammer from their toolbox. She points out that Longlegs would have needed to be inside the house to use the shotgun, knife, or hammer, yet the physical evidence suggests he never was. If not for the letters he left behind, it would almost seem as though he had never been there at all. Carter remarks, so he kills them, but not in person, to which Lee suggests, maybe he tells the families what he wants them to do, to themselves, to each other, and they obey. Carter comments that it sounds like something straight out of Manson's playbook. Lee responds that Manson had accomplices, prompting Carter to ask if she thinks Longlegs has someone helping him. Since Carter is drunk, Lee drives him home, and he invites her inside to introduce her to his wife, Anna, and their daughter, Ruby. Ruby takes Lee to her room and asks if she had always wanted to be an FBI agent when she was a little girl. Lee admits that she actually wanted to be an actress, to which Ruby responds, "That messes kids up." Ruby then asks, "Is it scary being a female FBI agent?" Lee replies that it is. Just then, Anna interrupts, saying she's sure Lee has a lot of important work to do. Ruby asks if Lee can come to her birthday party, to which Anna suggests, why doesn't she ask her herself? Lee assures her that she'll be there. Later that night, Lee calls her mother to check in, and during their conversation, we learn that Lee's birthday is approaching. Suddenly, she hears noises outside and quickly tells her mother she has to go but will call back later. As she hangs up, there's a loud knock at the door. Lee moves toward it, but after receiving no response, she decides not to open it. She switches on the outdoor lights and spots a silhouette in the distance. Lee grabs her gun and steps outside to confront the figure, but no one is there. However, when she turns back around, she sees someone inside her house. Lee rushes inside, only to find a letter left behind. The envelope reads, "Do not open until January 14th. Opening it, she discovers a birthday card from Longlegs, containing a message written in coded symbols. As she deciphers it, she realizes the murderer is threatening to kill her mother. She then receives a call from the department informing her that Carter is looking for her. The next morning, Lee arrives at a crime scene, where Carter tells her it's the same killer again. He adds that it appears the family had been preparing for a trip, and since a friend assumed they were away, no one checked in on them. Lee asks if the girl's birthday was on the 14th. Carter confirms that it seems to be the case. He notices Lee deciphering the message and asks how she figured it out, to which she simply responds that she just stared at it long enough. They proceed to the bedroom, where they're informed that the father was discovered in the garage with a kitchen knife in his hand, his wrists and throat slit. The wounds appear self-inflicted, but confirmation will come after further examination. Lee asks how long ago this occurred, and the agent replies that it was roughly a month ago. Carter then requests to see the bodies, and Lee inquires about the girl's age. The agent estimates she was 9 or 10. Later, Lee calls her mother to inform her that work will keep her busy, and she probably won't be able to visit. Her mother asks if she'll be coming for her birthday next week, and Lee says she'll try. Her mother then asks if she's still saying her prayers, insisting they offer protection from the devil. Lee acknowledges this before ending the call, promising to check in later. As Lee continues investigating, she stumbles upon a similar case from the 1970s tied to a satanic cult. She discovers that a 13-year-old victim named Andrea was murdered on November 16. As she analyzes the dates of all the victims' deaths, she hears a noise and senses a presence but chooses to ignore it. She opens a book titled 9 Circles of Hell and, while drawing connections between the dates, forms a triangle. The following day, Lee tells Carter that it's a pattern. She explains that the first murder happened on July 14, 1966, and the subsequent killings all took place within 6 days of the daughters' birthdays, either before or after, creating an inverted triangle. Carter asks what he's supposed to do with this information. Lee reveals that she has decoded all the letters and that one recurring phrase references the fine time we had at the Camera family farm, where X's mark certain spots. Carter mentions that he was in Georgetown at the time, and Lee adds that a local priest's visit to the farm ended in tragedy due to Carrie Ann's father and an axe from the toolshed. He murdered the priest and his wife before taking his own life, while Carrie Ann, who was at school, survived. Lee highlights the date of March 8 and points out that Ann's birthday, March 14, is precisely 6 days apart. She suggests that Longlegs was present at the Camera family farm and that Carrie Ann may have seen him. Carter asks about the 13th, and Lee admits she's uncertain but notes that it's only 3 days away, meaning Longlegs might strike again. Carter asks if Carrie Ann is still alive, and Lee confirms that she resides at Water Rock Psychiatric Hospital. They first decide to visit the Camera family farm. Following the X markings, they arrive at a location where a crucifix is nailed to the floor. Carter pries up some wooden planks and finds a piece of paper underneath with a triangle drawn on it. Digging further, they uncover a life-sized doll. When Carter picks it up to examine it, its eyes suddenly open. They take the doll to a doctor, who determines it is handmade, featuring a porcelain head, hands, and feet, an unbleached canvas body, cotton stuffing, and human hair, though most of it is missing. He also finds a metal ball inside the doll's head, referring to it as its brain. As he lets them hear the sound it makes, Lee is suddenly struck by a vision of a snake, followed by an image of a doll. Longlegs appears in her mind and tells her he knows she's no longer afraid of the dark, because she is the dark. He then covers her with a black cloth. Lee snaps out of her vision when the doctor mentions that the previous night, the doll kept whispering his ex-wife's name over and over. However, he dismisses it, blaming his late nights at work. Carter asks if the brain can be opened, and the doctor replies that it can, but there's nothing inside. Meanwhile, Longlegs visits a hardware store to buy supplies. When the cashier asks if she can assist him with anything else, he covers his eyes with his hands and says, "Cuckoo." The girl, confused, replies that she doesn't understand what he means. He then asks, "What day is your birthday?" Unnerved, the girl calls for her father, saying, "That creepy guy is back again." On his way back, we see Longlegs screaming, "Daddy, Mommy, unmake me and save me from the hell of living." Carter and Lee visit the psychiatric hospital, where a doctor informs them that Carrie Ann is catatonic. However, yesterday, she had a visitor, and something changed, like a switch was flipped inside her head. Suddenly, she was completely alert. Carter asks if the doctor saw the visitor, but he explains that he wasn't on site at the time, though the visitor's name should be in the log. Lee checks the register and asks if the guards verify IDs. The doctor tells her they don't require identification. Lee then speaks with Anne, who insists she has seen her before. Lee disagrees, but Anne is adamant, claiming she's either been to her house or has encountered someone who closely resembles her. Lee shifts the conversation and asks how Anne is feeling today. Anne describes it as different, like she's been trapped in a long, dark dream, stuck in limbo. Lee then asks if she remembers anything from before the long dream, like coming to the hospital or anything about her parents. Anne replies, "They didn't know what to do with themselves. I knew I was already a handful. Mom always hated me because of how I came out wrong when I was born. Dad was a good man. I remember that clearly. That's why he did what he did." Lee informs Anne that she had a visitor yesterday and asks if she can describe him. Anne responds that she never wants to forget him. She had been waiting for him to come and tell her what to do for him, or, even better, for the man down the stairs. She would do anything he asks, anything at all. If he told her to jump out a window, she would do it without hesitation. And if he told her to kill Lee right here in this room with her bare hands, she would do that too. Lee asks Anne if she remembers owning a special doll that looked just like her. Anne replies, "No," then adds, "And you don't remember either." Later, Lee tells Carter that Anne came out of her catatonic state the same day they discovered the doll. Carter dismisses it as a coincidence, adding that they opened the metal ball in the doll's head and found nothing inside. Lee suggests they might be overlooking something that makes it function, mentioning that in some cultures, dolls are used in rituals to manipulate people. Carter scoffs, asking, "So you're saying he kills them remotely with a doll? Longlegs is just a man, not some kind of witch doctor." He then questions how Longlegs knows her name. Lee admits she doesn't know. Carter continues, pointing out that just a week ago, the case was completely cold, but ever since she got involved, things have been moving fast. He tells her he reviewed her file again and asks when she last spoke to her mother. Lee asks what that has to do with the case. Carter reveals that her mother filed a police report on January 13, 1974, the day before Lee's 9th birthday, claiming she saw a tall, pale trespasser. He asks if she remembers seeing anyone like that at her house. Lee says she doesn't know, but Carter urges her to visit her mother and find out what she remembers about that night. Lee visits her mother, Ruth, who asks if she still says her prayers. Lee admits she never did because they frightened her. Ruth starts laughing, and when Lee asks what's so funny, Ruth says she's right, because none of their prayers ever helped them. As Lee prepares something for her mother to eat, she hears a noise that draws her attention. She goes to investigate and sees an insect crawling out from behind a closed door. This triggers a vision of a snake, followed by a childhood memory of her mother saying she got Deborah to cover her shift tomorrow, because it's someone's birthday. Lee approaches the door, and we see Ruth in the bathroom, washing something. Hearing the noise, Ruth steps out to check and quickly reaches for the phone, only to realize it's not working. She swiftly grabs a gun. The scene shifts back to the present, where Ruth remarks that she can't believe it's almost Lee's birthday again. She reminisces about that day, saying how much she bled and bled, but Lee interrupts, asking if she remembers her 9th birthday. Ruth says she doesn't recall anything and asks, "Do you?" Lee presses further, reminding her that she reported a trespasser to the police. Ruth insists that no one ever visited them and says some things are better left unknown. Lee argues that she isn't a child anymore, to which Ruth replies, "You're not a child because you were allowed to grow up. This world is cruel, especially for little ones, not all of them get to live." Lee asks what she means by that. Ruth explains that she might have buried those memories for both their sakes, but she never threw anything away. All of Lee's childhood belongings are still in her room. Lee goes to her old room and finds a box of photographs, triggering disturbing visions. She suddenly remembers her childhood encounter with Longlegs, the moment she took his picture. Ruth then appears, demanding, "Who is he? Why is he talking to my child?" Instead of answering, Longlegs starts singing. Lee returns to Carter and shows him the photograph of Longlegs, explaining that it's him. She found it in a box at her house. We then see Longlegs at a bus stop as police arrive. He surrenders without resistance. Later, they watch his interrogation tape. He identifies himself as Dale Ferdinand Cobble. When asked if he ever calls himself Longlegs, he smirks and asks, "When do I get to see Lee Harker?" The officer asks how he knows Lee. He simply responds, "A friend of a friend of a friend wants me to say, 'Happy birthday, Lee Harker.'" He wants them all to understand that he'll be there, and so will they. He then starts singing "Happy Birthday" for Lee, prompting Browning to switch off the tape, saying, "And he goes on like that for a while." Lee asks, "For how long?" To which Browning responds, 24 minutes. Carter then orders everyone to leave the room. Browning informs him that Longlegs' luggage was filled with notebooks, all containing handwriting that matches the letters found at the crime scenes, and the content is heavily satanic. She tells Lee that while the Bureau appreciates her involvement, it has created a difficult situation. So far, there is no physical evidence that Cobble has ever committed murder, even though he clearly worships the devil. But in the United States, that isn't a crime. She acknowledges how unsettling it is that he knows Lee, but there's nothing more they can do about it now that he's in custody. Lee responds, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, with 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his horns, he wore 10 crowns, and on each head was written a blasphemous name." Browning recognizes it as a passage from the Book of Revelation, but Lee corrects her, saying it's just Revelation, not plural. She then insists that Longlegs isn't working alone. He must have an accomplice, someone the family's trusted enough to let into their homes. Maybe even a child, or someone who could pass as one. Carter argues that they've already caught the person responsible for writing the letters, and if they handle things correctly, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Lee disagrees, stating that it isn't over yet because the triangle is still incomplete. They're still missing the 13th. Browning points out that the 13th is today and asks what they're supposed to do about it. Lee warns that his accomplice is likely to kill at least one more family, and Cobble is the only person who knows who the target is. Lee asks, "Where is he now?" Browning replies that he's downstairs, right beneath her feet. Lee remembers Longlegs telling Ruth that he was a friend of a friend who lives downstairs. When Ruth asked, "Downstairs from where?" he answered, "Everywhere," adding that she could call him Mr. Downstairs. Lee then heads to interrogate Longlegs. As soon as she steps into the room, he greets her with, "There she is, the almost birthday girl." Lee takes a seat across from him, and he remarks that it's amusing. He recalls that when she decided to join law enforcement at 20, they had a big laugh about it. Though only he laughed, not her. Lee asks, "Who is the she?" Longlegs replies, "The 7th she." He elaborates, saying it's all about being given the same choice, the choice they've all faced. Accept the gift and destroy it, along with yourself, or keep it, bow down, and get to work. Work that gets dirtier as it cleans, like a mop. Lee questions him, asking if he has been working with someone else, if another person has been helping him. Longlegs responds cryptically with a knock knock, and describes a scenario. A kind woman arrives at a farmhouse door with a Bible and a congratulatory message, telling the family that they've been chosen to receive a special gift from the church. He adds that everything is done according to the orders of the man downstairs. He mentions that the farmhouse will be so bright and white, it will be impossible to miss. Lee asks if he's talking about Carrie Ann Camera and what he said to her at the mental institution. Longlegs replies that Carrie Ann's house was even whiter when he visited. Lee then brings up January 13, 1974, to which Longlegs confirms that Lee's house, house number 8, was exceptionally white, and he knew then that the work they were doing was flawless. Lee asserts that his work is finished and that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Longlegs agrees, but adds that he won't only be in prison. "I'll be everywhere, waiting in the Father's wings." Lee asks who has been assisting him, but Longlegs tells her she'll have to figure it out on her own. When she presses him about the identity of the man downstairs, Longlegs smirks and says, "Why don't you ask your mommy?" Lee insists that her mother knows nothing, but Longlegs simply responds, "Hail Satan," before violently slamming his head against the table, startling Lee, and ultimately killing himself. Later, Carter tells Lee that it's over. He says they had their suspect, and now they have nothing. They let all those families die, and while none of it is okay, it's done. Regarding the 13th, Carter informs her that while she was in the interrogation room, Carrie Ann Camera jumped off the roof at Water Rock. He says Longlegs must have told her to do it when he saw her, just as he somehow manipulated the others into carrying out his wishes. Carter reassures Lee that Longlegs acted alone. No accomplices, no dark magic, no supernatural forces, nothing. Browning drives Lee to her mother's house and asks how she wants to proceed. Lee replies that she should go in alone and tell her mother they need her for questioning. She'll explain that they believe she may be able to help them identify the accomplice. As Lee enters the house, outside, Ruth suddenly shoots Browning. Hearing the gunfire, Lee looks out the window just in time to see her mother fire another shot at Browning. In shock, Lee rushes outside and demands that her mother put the gun down. Noticing a doll nearby, Lee asks her mother what it is. Ruth replies, "You caught him, and now he is free." Lee insists that Cobble is dead and that it's over, but Ruth simply says, "And you are free too," before shooting the doll. As Ruth fires, smoke pours from Lee's head, and she collapses. Before losing consciousness, she watches smoke rise from the doll's head as well. A flashback reveals Ruth telling Lee a story about how she and her daughter were always alone, with no visitors. Then, one day, a doll maker arrived at their home. He began his work, his dark magic, the work of the devil, embedding a piece of himself into each doll. The doll caused the little girl to forget, guiding her toward what she should see and what she should ignore. The devil wanted the child for himself, but her mother refused to allow it. So she pleaded for her daughter's life, striking a bargain in return. She agreed to assist him. Once a nurse, her new purpose became facilitating the deaths of families. It always went the same way. A knock at the farmhouse door, a kind woman with a Bible, and a cheerful, "Congratulations, you've won a gift from the church." Her only task was to get the doll inside. From his hiding place within the dolls, the devil would take care of the rest. She was there simply to observe and ensure everything happened as he intended. That was the deal she made. Lee regains consciousness and finds herself in the basement. Hearing a phone ringing, she stumbles upstairs and answers it. On the other end, the devil tells her she's late for Miss Ruby's birthday party. Panicking, Lee rushes to Carter's house, where Carter and his wife greet her warmly. Lee anxiously asks if everything is alright, and Carter assures her that everything is fine. In fact, she arrived just in time. Miss Ruby is about to start opening her presents. As Lee steps inside, she is stunned to see her mother there, watching Ruby play with the doll. Shaken, Lee urgently tells Carter that her mother is the accomplice. But Carter remains calm and asks her to sit down. Lee insists that he needs to listen to her, but Anna interjects, suggesting that it might be the perfect moment to bring out the cake. Carter agrees, saying he'll find something to cut it with. Ruth turns to Lee and murmurs, "The woman is already dead, and the little girl will be next." Carter asks Anna to join him in the kitchen. As she tells the others she'll be right back, Carter cryptically adds, "I'll be right back," but she'll still be in the kitchen. After they leave, Ruth tells Lee that all three of them must die. Lee demands to know why she's doing this. Ruth responds, "Because if we don't, we will burn and twist in hell forever." She insists that everything she has done has been for Lee, just as she always has, so that the little girl named Lee could grow up, making things right. She declares that she will continue until Lee stands upon the sand of the sea and sees a beast rise from the depths. Lee quickly pulls Ruby away from the doll. When Carter returns, intent on killing Ruby, Lee doesn't hesitate. She shoots him, killing him instantly. Ruth, overcome with rage, orders Lee to move aside. As she lunges at Ruby to kill her, Lee fires once more, killing her mother. Lee pulls Ruby away from the doll and aims her gun to destroy it, only to realize she's out of bullets. The scene cuts to Longlegs singing "Happy Birthday" for Lee, his voice growing louder and more intense. As he reaches the final verse, he chants, "Hail Satan," and the screen fades to black, ending the movie. That's my explanation for the movie, Longlegs. So, what do you guys think about the movie? Write in the comment, turn on the notification and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.